Hello, my name is Angela, and I'd like to welcome you to this Cincilingua membership lesson video. In this video, we are going to look at the past perfect tense. Now, the past perfect tense is formed with the word had and the past participle of the verb. So if you're not sure what the past participle is, it's the third part of the verb. So if we look at the verb go, go is an irregular verb because it changes. Go, went, gone. This third part is the past participle. And we always use the past participle in the advanced verb tenses. If we look at a regular verb, these are the verbs we just add ed. Talk, talked, talked. That would be the third part of the verb or the past participle. So let's look at how we conjugate the past perfect tense. You're going to see that everyone is the same in this verb tense. I had been, you had been, he had been, she had been, it had been, we had been, you had been, they had been. And this verb tense is used to describe a past action that was completed before another past action. So let me give you a visual so it's easy to see. So we have two verb tenses in these sentences. We have the present perfect, had been, had gone, had talked. We have the idea or the word of before, and then we have past tense because we have two actions. And this verb tense, we're having a conversation today. And we're talking about two things in the past. Now, action number one started and finished before action number two began. So if we look at this example, I had lived in Virginia before I moved to Ohio. So in this chart, it shows us that in 1986, I moved to Virginia, and I'm in Virginia, in Virginia, in Virginia, in Virginia. But in 1991, I said goodbye to Virginia, and I moved. So action number one finished before action number two began. So I lived in Virginia. I packed up everything. It's finished. I moved to Ohio in 1991. So I had lived in Virginia before I moved to Ohio. This action was first. It finished. And then this is the second action. Let's look at several examples so that it will be easier to understand and use. I had lived in Boston before I moved to Seattle. So again, we have this idea of before. So this action happened first, it finished, and then this is the next action. I had lived in Boston before I moved to Seattle. I had worked as an engineer before I became the director of marketing. So again, we have before. This happened before this happened, but both are in the past tense. Now you see that the first action we use past perfect, had worked. Second action, we use just the past tense, became. Marvin had studied for 5 years at the university before he started working. So here he is over here studying for 5 years at Liberty University, LU. And this happened before he started working at his company. Alicia had traveled to Europe before she studied Italian. So Alicia went on vacation to Italy and other areas of Europe maybe, but she loved Italy. And then when she came back, she decided she wanted to study Italian. So she had traveled to Europe before she studied Italian. I had the operation before I went to therapy. Now, this may look strange to you, had, but it's correct. Remember, in the past perfect tense, you're going to use had plus the past participle, that third part of the verb. So if we need to use the verb have, had. So we always use had, and then the past participle, have, had. So it's had. I had the operation before I went to therapy. And again, the operation happened first, it finished, and then the next action was that I went to therapy. Ruth had been a physical education teacher before she came here. So we see Ruth over here. This is her physical education class, working with the children. And then she stopped working there and she came to this new school. So she had been a physical education teacher before she came here to a different school. Ginny had worked in the scheduling area before she married Matt. So it means that Ginny was single, not married, and she started working in the scheduling area. And then later, she married her husband, Matt. But this happened before this. Ginny had worked in the schedule area before she married Matt. Patricia had never eaten a three-way before she moved to Cincinnati. Now, you might be asking, what is a three-way? Okay, so in Cincinnati, we have a couple different restaurants that serve three-ways. I think that the original restaurant that served it was called Skyline. And this is a Cincinnati restaurant that everybody loves or hates. So a three-way is spaghetti, chili, and cheese. Okay, so that's a three-way. And in other states, other cities, you cannot find this restaurant. She had never eaten a three-way before she moved to Cincinnati. So we still have the idea of before, but remember that word never means 0 times in her life. Angela had made other plans before she knew about the party. Okay, so Angela made plans to go on a cruise. She paid for her ticket. She got her airplane ticket. She was ready to go on the cruise. And then someone invited her to a party, a 50th birthday party for one of the friends. But she couldn't go because she had made other plans before she knew about the party. The pilots had been on strike for 2 weeks before they agreed to the new contract. So the pilots are on strike, they're outside, they have the signs, they're not working, they're not flying the airplanes. And then they agreed to a new contract and they went back to work. So the pilots had been on strike for 2 weeks before they agreed to the new contract. Matthew had worked at a camp for handicapped adults before he chose his major. So he was working at this camp for adults who were handicapped, and he helped them, and he really enjoyed doing that. And then at the university, he chose his major. The major is what you study, and that is what the area you want to work in. So he chose a major that would allow him to work with children in a school, teaching them sports and coaching. And so then that was what his career was in. Matthew had worked at a camp for handicapped adults before he chose his major. You had seen the movie at a premiere before it was at the cinemas. Now, a premiere is like the first showing. So like Hollywood makes a movie, then you see the red carpet and the actors, and they invite a small group of people to come and watch the first showing, and that is what we call a premiere. And then later, after the premiere, then the movie goes to all the cinemas. So now everybody can go in and buy a ticket. So you had seen the movie at the premiere, just a few people invited, before it was at the cinema. Nancy had spoken to me about the project before she made the presentation. So we see that Nancy is making the presentation right now in this picture. But before she made that presentation, she talked to me in person, or maybe she called me. So she had spoken to me about the project before she made the presentation. The athlete had competed at the Olympics in Japan before he retired. So this athlete, he competed for many years in his life, but he had competed in the Olympics in Japan. And when that finished, or later after that, then he retired. He stopped competing. He retired. The athlete had competed at the Olympics in Japan before he retired. The tour guide had traveled on more than 200 safaris before he retired. So this is a safari where they take people out into the wild to see the animals in their natural habitat. And the tour guide had traveled on more than 200 safaris before he retired. I had tried on 6 pairs of shoes before I found a pair that I liked. Okay, so I went to the store. I tried on the first pair, didn't like it. Second pair, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Finally, I liked the 6th pair. So I had tried on 6 pairs of shoes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, before I found a pair that I liked. The computer programmer had revised the system before it crashed. Okay, so he did all the revising, made sure it was up to date, everything was good. And then later, something happened, it crashed. The computer programmer had revised the system before it crashed. He had worked as a supervisor for 5 years before he became the manager. So over here, he's the supervisor, he's working with his team. and he worked as the supervisor for 5 years. He did that before he became the manager. England had exported beef to France before the problem began. So England, they have their beef and they put it in the truck and they export it over to France, and all that happened before the problem began. So there was a problem with the cows, and then they couldn't export their beef for some period of time. England had exported beef to France before the problem began. The Congress had negotiated across party lines before they reached a consensus. Okay, so across party lines. In the United States, we have two main political parties. We have the Republicans and the Democrats. And a lot of times they don't agree. A lot of times they don't work together. But sometimes they will work on something together and they pass that together, okay? Bipartisan voting. So reaching a consensus means that they agreed, okay? So the Congress had negotiated across party lines before they reached a consensus. So they were working together and finally they agreed on something. She had lived in Costa Rica before she moved to New York. So she lived in Costa Rica. She decided to move, and then she moved to New York. So this happened before this happened. I want to thank you for watching this Cincilingua membership lesson video. I hope that it has helped you understand the past perfect tense more and that you can start using that. Make sure you look at our other videos and keep coming back, because we will continue to add more videos. And we have the Kahoot quizzes and games and many other things to help you improve your English. You also want to attend as many live classes as you can, and we will be going over all the different concepts in English. Thank you for being a member. We are happy to have you. We enjoy working with you. Have a wonderful day.